My name is Summer, and I'm gripping my phone, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end, my mother-in-law is screaming at me, her voice growing louder with every word. "Why did you do it? What on earth possessed you to demolish the house?" she shouts, clearly beside herself with rage. I take a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I can explain," I begin, but she cuts me off before I can get another word in. "You better have a good reason. I want to know everything," she demands, her tone sharp. "Well then," I say, my voice calm. "Let me start from the very beginning. Maybe then you'll understand." This whole ordeal began long before she ever moved into my home, long before I even met my husband, Robert. It all started when I was in college, and my grandfather passed away. My grandfather was a kind man, but like many families, ours was complicated. When he passed, our family was thrown into a dispute, not about money, but about what to do with his old house. No one could agree on a solution. The house was old, falling apart in places, and keeping it up would cost a fortune. Yet no one in the family seemed to want to step up and take responsibility. Everyone already owned their own homes, and no one wanted the burden of maintaining an old, creaky house. The property came with land, so it was valuable, but it would take effort to turn it into something useful, and effort, it seemed, was something no one was willing to give. For weeks, the discussion went round and round. Some suggested selling it, others thought it should be demolished. But I saw something different. I saw potential. I was still a university student at the time, but I knew that owning property, especially land, was an opportunity most people my age didn't have. "Maybe I could take it," I suggested one evening at a family gathering. The room fell silent for a moment, and then there were nods of agreement all around. No one hesitated to hand the responsibility to me. To them, it seemed like a win-win situation. I'd get the house and land, and they'd get rid of the problem. Before I knew it, the house and land were mine. At first, it was a bit overwhelming. I was still in school, juggling part-time jobs and studying for exams, and now I had inherited a house with all the associated responsibilities. There were inheritance taxes, of course, and those weren't cheap. But I worked hard, borrowed some money from my parents, and by the time I graduated, I had paid it all off. The house and land were officially mine. After graduation, I started working at a publishing company. I loved my job, and life was finally falling into place. Then I met Robert. He was a friend of a friend, and we hit it off right away. Before long, we were inseparable. When we got married, I suggested we move into the house I had inherited from my grandfather. It wasn't perfect. Old houses never are. But it was ours. Robert agreed without hesitation. He didn't mind the creaky floors or the outdated appliances. We were happy, building our life together in that house. But then everything changed. One afternoon, my mother-in-law came over to visit. We were sitting in the living room, chatting, when she suddenly dropped a bombshell. "We're thinking of moving out of our apartment," she said casually, as if it was just a passing thought. "Do you mind if we stay with you for a little while? Just until we find a new place?" I was taken aback. She said it so lightly, but the reality of what she was asking felt heavy. She wasn't just asking for herself, she was asking for her whole family. My father-in-law and my sister-in-law included. 3 extra people in our home. Well, I stammered, unsure how to respond. But before I could fully process what was happening, my mother-in-law smiled, that knowing smile she often used when she was getting her way. "It's just temporary," she added. "We'll be out before you know it. Plus, I'll help with the housework." I wanted to protest. I wanted to explain that this was our home, that we needed our space as newlyweds. But instead, I found myself nodding, unable to come up with a reason that would make sense to her. After all, how could I say no to family? So, they moved in. At first, things were manageable. The house was big enough, and my mother-in-law did pitch in here and there with the cooking and cleaning. But as the days turned into weeks, things started to change. My mother-in-law became less helpful and more demanding. My sister-in-law, who I thought would keep to herself, seemed to spend all her time lounging around the house, contributing nothing. And my father-in-law? He acted like I was his personal maid, expecting me to cook for him late at night when he came home from wherever he spent his evenings. The strain was building, and my patience was wearing thin. I remember one particularly frustrating evening when I finally confronted my mother-in-law. You promised you'd help with the housework, I reminded her. Zrenia, my voice shaking with frustration. Did I? She replied, feigning innocence. I don't recall making such a promise. That's when my sister-in-law chimed in. You should be more respectful, she snapped. After all, we're your husband's family. You're just the daughter-in-law. I was stunned. Just the daughter-in-law? This was my house. But they didn't seem to care. As time went on, their sense of entitlement only grew. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law partied and went out with friends, leaving me to manage the house on my own. My father-in-law continued to make unreasonable demands, and any attempt I made to stand up for myself was met with hostility. I tried to talk to Robert about it, but he was always caught in the middle. He didn't want to take sides, so he suggested that we just wait it out. They'll find a place soon, he assured me. Just give it time. But time passed and nothing changed. In fact, it seemed like they were getting more comfortable by the day. My in-laws were showing no signs of moving out. Every time I brought up the subject, they would change the topic or come up with a new excuse. Why would they leave when they have everything they want here for free? I muttered to Robert one night after another tense dinner. He nodded, a frown forming on his face. You're right, he admitted. This has gone on long enough. We need to figure out what's really going on. Together, we decided to investigate. We reached out to a private detective, hoping to uncover the truth. Were they really planning to move out, or were they squatting in our home indefinitely? The results came back faster than we expected, and they confirmed our worst suspicions. My in-laws had no intention of leaving. They were comfortable, living rent-free, with no plans to search for a new home. In fact, they were using our house as a base while they spent their money elsewhere, on vacations, nights out, and luxury items. I was furious, but I kept my cool. I knew I needed a plan. I wasn't going to let them continue to take advantage of us, but I also knew that confronting them directly would only lead to more drama. So, I waited. I bided my time. Then, one day, my mother-in-law made an unexpected suggestion. Why don't we all go on a family trip together? She said, a wide smile on her face. A trip? I repeated, suspicious. Yes, she continued, to make up for all the trouble we've caused you. We'll go somewhere nice, just the family. I hesitated. It seemed too good to be true. After everything they had put me through, now they wanted to take me on a trip. But I decided to play along. Sure, I said slowly. That sounds nice. My mother-in-law beamed, clearly pleased with herself. Great. We've already decided on England. It'll be a wonderful trip. The plans were made quickly. They chose the dates, the flights, and even the hotels. But there was one catch. They didn't have enough money to cover the costs. Could you front the money for us? My sister-in-law asked sweetly. We'll pay you back once Dad gets his retirement bonus. It's guaranteed, so you don't need to worry. I didn't believe for a second that they would pay me back, but I went along with it anyway. I had my own reasons for agreeing. I knew that if they left the house, even for just a week or two, it would give me the opportunity I needed. On the day of the trip, I packed my bags and headed to the airport. But something felt off. I decided to call Robert to check in, but before I could dial his number, my phone rang. It was Robert's number, but when I answered, it wasn't him on the line. It was my mother-in-law. Summer, where are you? She asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. I'm on my way to the airport, I replied, confused. Oh dear, she said with a laugh. You must have misunderstood. The flight's already boarding. We're about to take off. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. They had lied to me about the flight time. They never intended for me to go on the trip with them. Why would you do this? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, she replied with a smirk, it's a family trip. We didn't think you'd mind if we left you behind. You're not really part of the family after all. I was speechless. My mother-in-law hung up, and I sat in silence, staring at my phone. I should have seen this coming, I thought. But instead of feeling defeated, a strange sense of calm washed over me. They may have outplayed me this time, but they had no idea what I was capable of. As soon as their plane took off, I sprang into action. I called a demolition company and arranged to have the house torn down while they were away. I hired movers to pack up all of their belongings and transport them to an old warehouse my grandfather used to own. By the time they returned from their little family vacation, the house would be gone, and so would everything they had left inside it. The demolition team arrived the next morning, and within hours, Zrenia, the house that had been the source of so much stress, was nothing but rubble. I stood on the now empty plot of land, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. The house was gone, and with it, the memories of the months I had spent being walked all over by my in-laws. When they returned from their trip, they were in for a surprise. It didn't take long for the phone calls to start. "Where's the house?" my mother-in-law screamed, her voice shrill with panic. "It's gone," I replied simply. "I demolished it." "Why would you do that? Where are our things?" "I moved them," I said calmly. "They're in a warehouse. You can have them back once you pay me for the trip and the moving expenses." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then finally my mother-in-law spoke again, her voice trembling. "You'll get your money," she said. "But this isn't over." I smiled to myself. Oh, it was over. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had control again.